All right, this is the second part of the 702 lesson, and we left off here farming in dry country. The Western Plains received little rainfall. To make a living off this dry land, homesteaders had to adapt to their environment. With no timber, they burned buffalo chips for fuel and built homes out of the region's most abundant material, the ground itself. A settler's first home was often a dugout hollowed out of a hill. Within weeks or months, a family might build a soddy, a house constructed from bricks of dirt or matted grass, with tar paper and straw roof held up by a forked stick. In dry seasons, dust and straw rained in from the ceiling. When wet weather came, streams of water turned the dirt floor into a pool of mud. Farmers who could afford to buy imported lumber built plank houses at the first opportunity. To find a reliable source of drinking water, farmers often had to sink wells 200 to 300 feet into the ground. In the 1880s, improved drills helped with this task, and windmills drew water to the surface. But even those innovations could not bring enough water to the fields. Farming in the dry plains required new techniques, choosing a drought-tolerant crop, plowing deep into the earth while the dirt was still wet, and then packing the soil and covering with dust to trap moisture. Scientists assured farmers that these so-called dry farming methods guaranteed abundant crops even in dry years. In fact, dry farming only worked in wet weather. When the skies dried up, so did the soil. In the fall of 1888, the Is family watched a steady train of wagons roll by their Kansas farm. Peopled by grizzled, dejected, and surly men, sick, tired, and hopeless women, this defeated legion, as one of his boys called them, was headed not west but east. Drought had struck the high plains, transforming a land of hope into a desert of shattered dreams. Fields that once rippled with golden wheat now offered only dust and ash. Families watched as their crops and products of months of labor and their only source of income withered on the stalk. With no earnings and no savings, half the population of western Kansas and Nebraska abandoned their farms and moved back east. That reminds me a lot of, if you're familiar with Little House on the Prairie stories by Laura Ingalls Wilder, it reminds me a lot of their pioneer adventures, especially when you're talking about the locust invasions. That's in the banks of Plum Creek. Talking about the long blizzards, that's reminiscent of a long winter. In that series of books, one of my favorites from back in that time. By the late 19th century, many who hoped to set up farms in the West simply couldn't afford it. Settlers had to buy seed, livestock, and equipment. It would see no profits until after a few years' crops had gone to market. More than half the African American farmers and a quarter of the whites on the plains became tenant farmers, working acreage they rented from a landlord. Many hoped to make enough profit from the sale of their crops to buy their land outright, but the number of tenant farmers would continue to grow in the coming decades. Okay, let's go back then to the lesson, and you should have completed your reading guide, or if you were just going along with the lesson answer key, be familiar with those concepts there. And then there is a graded assignment to work on today. Before we get to that, let's read this: Homesteading in the West. Imagine opening the newspaper and seeing an announcement from the U.S. government that it was giving away land for free. That's exactly what happened in the second half of the 19th century, first in 1862 and then in 1889. Hundreds of thousands of Americans took advantage of this offer, and the population of the West grew rapidly. And that was, of course, the Homestead Act. Okay, let's look at the graded assignment now. Okay, here is the 7.02 graded assignment called Miner, Cowboy, or Farmer. 100 points. Imagine it is 1880. The Civil War has been... Oh, stop it. Imagine it's 1880. The Civil War has been over for 15 years. Economic conditions in the town you live in have deteriorated, and you are struggling to make ends meet. You decide to try your luck out west, where there is plenty of land and plenty of opportunity. Before leaving, you must decide what you will do out west: be a miner, a cowboy, or a farmer. Each presents its own opportunities and difficulties. In an essay, write an essay in which you tell about what you would be: a miner, cowboy, or farmer. Describe the opportunities you would have, describe the difficulties you would face, and explain why you chose as you did. And you should have no less than 2 paragraphs for this assignment. And that will tell you a quality to go really above and beyond to do the best that you possibly could do. What I like to see is not only talking about, like, let's say you picked a minor. Not only will you talk about why you chose that and the difficulties, but you might also address then why you picked it over the difficulties or the pleasures of being a cowboy or farmer. So then you describe the other two slightly as well. You only have to pick one, but I'm just saying, if you want to really want to make a quality, top, way up there assignment, you would also bring in factors about the other 2 occupations as well. So think about this then. So what you have to do is talk about basically the pros and cons of the occupation and why you chose as you did. If you want, you can make it into a story, make it as like a diary or a journal entry if you really want to be creative. I mean, that's fine. If you want to put a creative twist to it, please go ahead and do so. But let's think about this. So a minor, if we go back to our textbook, where do we find information on mining? Let's look at page 465 first. Okay, so here we talk about, on page 465, talks a little bit about the California gold rush, the Chinese moving into the area because of the gold rush. Talks here about the growth of mining out west, not only gold mines, but other mines as well. Talks about the Comstock lode, talks about the conditions that you'd be working in. Perhaps you would start working for a mining company. If you weren't successful on your own, maybe you'd go work for a mining company. And ends there. Also talks about Alaska. Maybe you're going to go to Alaska and try to find gold in the Yukon. That's another thing you can include as well. But talk about the difficulties, what the job was like, and the opportunities that might bring with that job as well. The pros and the cons. Cowboys. Here it starts here, cattle ranchers and cowboys. What were the advantages of this line of work? What were the disadvantages, and why did you choose as you did? There is also, remember, in the prior lesson to read a little bit more about cowboys. In this lesson, 7.01, the Great American Desert, there was also some reading here about cowboys. Yep, this reading here is something else you could include if you choose to talk about the cowboys as well. And then lastly, a little bit more about cattle mining here. Then, let's see, then lastly, oh, wait a minute. Just go back a second. Talking about mining, you could also talk about oil discoveries, timber. Timber, I guess, really isn't mining, but if you really wanted to make it a stretch, you could talk about how cutting down timber is kind of like mining the plains or mining the forest. So it's kind of if you describe it well enough, I would give it credit for it. And then lastly, farmer. Life on the western farms is where that begins. The difficulties, especially on the Great Plains. Oh, going back here a second. If you're picking farmer, you definitely want to talk about the Homestead Act. Well, that would be a reason why you chose to be a farmer, because of the free land. Don't forget to talk about the Homestead Act. That's going to be something you definitely want to have in there. And then it continues on here until where we finished, talking about farming. So details about the opportunities and difficulties of the occupation you chose. If you wanted to take it to the next level, talk about the difficulties and opportunities of the other jobs you didn't choose as well. And that is the 702 graded assignment. When you're done, make sure you submit it to the Dropbox and get it all taken care of. It's 100 points, so you don't want to miss that one. If you have any questions, as always, email me and let me know. Thanks.